if you're loud enough about it and you do it often enough, people are going to think you're on to something. My view of end times is going to work like it worked the first time. If you see somebody marrying their view of end times to either A, the gospel, or B, someone's level of commitment to Jesus, okay, then that individual has a spiritual problem. A, I don't have a verse that connects the abomination of desolation with the number. That doesn't exist. God has a reason for not putting all the cards on the table.
This one might be a little bit more controversial. Dr. Michael Heiser explains his eschatology in his thoughts on biblical prophecy. So let's get right into it. I'd love to know your comments, but this one is wild. Let's get into it.
This is why I really dislike eschatology.
Oof.
Because there's so much left to the domain of speculation that you can pick out just about anything, any facet of the end times subject, because there's a lot that goes under that umbrella, and run with it and defend a particular idea.
It can be so easy to find something in the New Testament, in the Revelation, and be like, this is exactly how it is. You see, it's in the Bible, so you can't deny me. You can't be in opposite position than me. And that's what happened with the Left Behind movies. Everyone saw that, and it was super loud and popular. And now everyone thinking that everything's going to be just like the Left Behind movies. And he's going to even get into whoever's the loudest and the proudest.
And if you're loud enough about it and you do it often enough, people are going to think you're on to something. And the people who are doing that know that, because it's so complicated, it's so vast, there's so many ins and outs and intricacies of it, that who in the world is really going to spend the time to tell me I'm wrong?
True.
So it lends itself to these idiosyncratic readings of things. And my view is that we should leave the ambiguities where they're at. I think they're intentional. My view of end times is going to work like it worked the first time.
I love how he said leave the ambiguity. If the Bible says no one knows the day of the Lord's return, Jesus' return, besides God himself, then you're not going to know. So quit trying to figure it out. If someone does tell you they know, they're lying.
Things that are intentionally cryptic, we're not supposed to know. So don't worry about it. That's not a very popular view. I won't sell very many books. It's like a 3-page book right there. I'll make it a Kindle. Nobody will know what the page count is.
Nice.
But I think my advice to you is just expose people to your view. You have every right to do that. But also expose them to the fact that you know what some of the problems with your own view is, and you know what the problems with their view are as well. And so just have an honest discussion. And rule number 1 is, if you see somebody marrying their view of end times to either A, the gospel, or B, someone's level of commitment to Jesus, okay, then that individual has a spiritual problem.
Call out. Shots fired. I totally agree with these certain things are not ours first issues. Like if you're saved or not, whether or not you're going to go to heaven when you die. This is totally different. That's like also talking about creation account, how old the earth is. Like those are secondary issues. Yeah, you could talk about them and it's good for maybe apologetics. But if someone kind of disagrees with you, doesn't have exactly the same viewpoint on Genesis, does that mean that they're not going to heaven? Does that mean they don't have an amazing relationship with Jesus? It might, but it's not like 100% that's the fact.
Okay, so I would try to have it the most charitable discussion you can and work through all the ins and outs of all, find why. Why do people disagree? I mean, what are the issues? And try to focus on, are these things resolvable or not? Are they soluble or not? And if they're not, okay, then, we've spent enough time on that, let's move on to the other one. Or there's 2 or 3 possibilities and we can keep talking about these things. But since none of us in the room are omniscient, okay, try to get everybody else to admit they're not omniscient, which is actually a taller order than you would think, especially on Facebook, okay?
That's a good group.
All right, if you can get them to admit they're not omniscient, then, okay, let's meet here and chat and this and that and the other thing, but I know that if you don't hold my view, I believe you're still a believer, you're committed to the Lord.
Amen.
And I'm just here because I just like to have the conversation. And I could be wrong. I don't know.
That's good.
I'm looking for something that I haven't really sort of thrown into the blender and see where that comes out. There's nothing wrong, with that. The only thing I would put in the wrong category in these kinds of discussions is when these subjects become substitutes for one of those two things. And trust me, I know. There are people who cross that line. They can't imagine anyone being serious about the Lord or the Bible like if they don't believe in a rapture. They just can't literally wrap their mind around that. And what that tells you is they've been taught to conflate two things. Okay, the definition of the gospel with this other doctrinal point. Now I'll give you a personal story. And this I was considering, how old was I? I was probably 20. See, I got married when I was 28, 29, something like that. 87. No, I was 24. Boy, I'm really losing track of it here. And I was entertaining the thought of, I didn't define it this way, but the way it turned out was I was going to have to leave, or I would be basically expunged from my tradition, because I was going to go to a school that was sort of outside the approved orbit for seminary, and not all the views of this particular place were the same as were in my church. And so that didn't bother me, but it bothered other people. And I remember having a discussion with some of the leadership at the church, because I was kind of being groomed to be a pastor. You know how this works, okay?
Yep.
We have a guy interested in the Bible. Boy, he must be. You got to get him into the ministry. Whether I was good at it or not, it didn't matter,
That's like when people see that you're really good at speaking, and they're like, you must be a pastor because you can preach really good. Well, pastoring is not just preaching. It's shepherding the flock. Those are two different things. Public speaking and being a pastor, so different. I mean, it helps a lot to be a good public speaker and a preacher if you are a pastor, 100%.
And I said, do you mean to tell me that if Charles Haddon Spurgeon, who was a post-tribber, or D.L. Moody, who believed in the second blessing, it sounded charismatic, okay? You mean to tell me if Spurgeon and Moody were alive today, we would not have them speak at our church? And they said, nope. And that convinced me to leave.
Ooh, that's good.
Because
the guy in the back is so funny. He's making all the comments.
my thought was, as much as I have benefited from this context, I do not want to become that. So very early on, I've sort of had my radar tracking on this kind of stuff. I'm willing to have any of the discussions, but you have got to stop assessing someone's commitment to the Lord based on their level of percentage of agreement with every thought that runs through your head. You are not omniscient. There's a reason why for 2,000 years people have been debating this or that thing. It's because the text does not provide exquisite, granular precision clarity on everything. It just doesn't. To me, that tells me God really didn't care as much about that topic as he did another topic. I mean, that's my clue. God was perfectly capable of giving us 100 pages, more on eschatology to answer all these, but he doesn't. So I'm going to try to be more concerned about the stuff that there is greater clarity on, because I'm going to assume that that's what God wanted me to focus on.
Amen.
Again, that might seem really simplistic. I tend to approach lots of things simplistically like that. But so that's what I've always got in my radar. I mean, have you crossed the line to you really operating under the presumption that you are omniscient, aren't you? You know, I mean, that's the kind of thing I'd say in the Facebook group, which is why I stay out of them. Okay? But honestly,
But doesn't he? There's some things that the Bible is maybe not so clear about in the Old Testament that he gets into. To be fair, a little pushback. Like they don't go into detail about the Nephilim because they already assume that you know who they are. But maybe that's a good point, though. We should assume that they knew who the Nephilim were. Therefore, we should know who they are.
there are some people, that's where they're at. They may not realize, some of them do, but they may not realize it, but that's really what's running through their head. Like I know the answer to every question. Why can't you see it? Well, but for the grace of God, I would be, you know, I mean, honestly, this is where it comes to these discussions.
Could the abomination of desolation actually be something that happens internally to all the humans that are left that have the mark of the beast?
Yeah, I don't think there's any way to directly connect the abomination event with the mark of the beast. In other words, the two things tend to not get discussed together, and the one seems to require a specific chronology. Again, I'm answering it that way because a lot of this depends on how you take Daniel 9. Daniel 9 is when the abomination is mentioned. So, gosh, it's such a can of worms. Don't somebody laughing. It is a can of worms. Let's just go to Daniel 9 in case the passage is not familiar to you. And this is going to sound, this is going to sound like, depending on how you read it, you could associate it with an antichrist, but you don't get a mention of a number, okay? So these two thoughts are associated with this individual, but they're not like, you can't pin a chronology on the one. So it says, 70 weeks are decreed about your people and your holy city to finish the transgression, to put an end to sin, and to atone for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal both vision and prophet, and to anoint a most holy place. Know therefore and understand that from the going out of the word to restore and build Jerusalem, to the coming of an anointed one, a prince, there shall be 7 weeks. Then for 62 weeks it shall be built again with squares and moat, but in a troubled time. And after the 62 weeks an anointed one shall be cut off and shall have nothing. And the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. Its end shall come with a flood. And to the end there shall be war. Desolations are decreed. He shall make a strong covenant with many for 1 week. And for half of the week he shall put an end to sacrifice and offering, and on the wing of the abomination shall come one who makes desolate. That's the abomination of desolation. King James has it worded a little bit differently. And, other translations do too. So on the wing of the abominations shall come one who makes desolate until the decreed end is poured out on the desolator. Sounds like Nostradamus, to be honest with you. Like if you put it in quatrains, that's where it would belong. There's a lot of, I'm going to use the H word, hopelessly ambiguous language in this passage. I'll just say this. If you come across anyone that claims that they have this totally figured out, that person can be safely ignored, okay? This is so complicated. Look at it. 70 weeks are decreed about your people. Okay, 70 weeks, the 70 weeks of Daniel, a week is 7 years, you got 490 years. Okay. Let's just go with that. Well, the 70 weeks are designed to finish the transgression and to put an end to sin. Okay. Well, that would sound like the 70 weeks end right at the time the new earth starts. But that's typically not where it's placed in end times scenarios. It's typically placed at the return of the Lord if you're a pre-tribulationalist. You have a rapture first and second coming. The 7-year tribulation is the last week. Then you have the day of the Lord, and the Lord returns. But then, Revelation 20, you get another rebellion, right? After a 1,000-year millennium, you get another rebellion. Well, no, wait a minute. I thought it was supposed to put an end to sin. Oops. We have a problem passage now. Yes, all the...
Oh my goodness. Dr. Michael Heiser. It's funny. That's tricky. Some people have so many ideas about the abomination of desolation, when it will come. Has it already come? Did it happen in 70 AD? Did it happen? Do we have to wait for it now? Is it going to happen during the Antichrist? Like, what is going on?
Problem passages. Well, if it's not a pre-trib, basically I could track you through all the views and show you where they're going to struggle with language in here. So the short answer is, A, I don't have a verse that connects the abomination of desolation with the number. That doesn't exist. If you're asking, is this something internal? You brought up a temple. If you're looking at the abomination as a future thing, you might think that you need a temple for it, okay, because of the language, destroy the city and the sanctuary. Okay, well, this is why you have other end times systems that say it does refer to a city and a sanctuary. That was Jerusalem and the temple, which was destroyed in 70 AD. So this is actually past, by the time you get Revelation written, it's current and past history. It's not a future prophecy anymore. If you don't believe that, if you think the content of Revelation is future, and you think that this, city and the sanctuary, connect to the abominations that shall come, and more specifically, the wing of abominations. Okay, why is that a building? Question number one. Why is wing of the abominations a building? And two, why is that building the temple?
This is why so many people are waiting for the third temple to be built, though. So many people are looking like, oh my goodness, they're going to be building another temple soon. I just recently saw something, actually, I should check out. But yeah, they're like, oh, the third temple is going to be built. That means the end times prophecy is going to be fulfilled. Could be. There's a lot of talk about this. There'd have to be some crazy peace in the Middle East.
In other words, these are things that certain views of prophecy assume, and then they argue on the basis, they argue their system on the basis of that assumption that this wing, talk and abomination talk has to do with the temple and the sanctuary. But the verse doesn't actually connect them. You could read them as it's a grocery list of things that are involved in some way in end times. You got the city, the sanctuary, then whatever this abomination wing is, what's the desolation. It's just, I'm going to use the H word again, it's just hopelessly difficult to try to be able to figure out which system is correct and how to sort of piece all this together. My view is that all of that is intentional. Again, I think prophecy, future prophecy works exactly the way that prophecy worked the first time. You're not supposed to know until hindsight. God has a reason for not putting all the cards on the table. Again, you say, well, that's like a cop-out view. That's a cheating view. Well, call it what you want. It's my view.
Well, at the end of the day, we all have to trust in God no matter what. There's reasons why he doesn't reveal things to us. Maybe we couldn't handle it, or it's just him testing us and wanting us to completely rely on him through everything, through the good and the bad. So, guys, very interesting. Shout out to Dr. Michael Heiser. Go subscribe to their channel. They have an amazing channel. They still post on there. So love and appreciate you all. Thank you so much for watching. I encourage you to seek Jesus and put him first above all else. It will be the best decision you could ever make.